Coming to you from the Trumbull Insurance Agency virtual studio. Turn your stress and anxiety into peace and security with Trumbull Insurance. Contact Patrick Van Kemper today at 540-532-0622 for all your insurance needs. For the rest of our sponsors, Regroup Building Services, PM Plus Reserves, Shenandoah Primitives, Dr. Dave Leadership Corporation, and Mark Francis with Icon Real Estate. This is another Kirby on Sports podcast production, exclusively on the Kirby on Sports podcast YouTube page, and we have an exciting guest for you today. But before we do, this is the first time with the Swiss Army knife, Carlos Martinez, on an exclusive interview. Carlos, how are you, sir?
This isn't my first time on. We did the Washington interview, but I'm fantastic.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Well, it's great. It's great to have you on, Carlos. I'm glad you're here for this. And very special guest. If you're local listening to my podcast, which I know a lot of you are, he is a Winchester native who went to James Wood High School. Then from there, played soccer at West Virginia University, Boulder Rapids Reserve, before making his way to the MLS, getting drafted by DC United in 2006. It is Devon McTavish. He is now calling games on NBC Sports Washington alongside my man, Dave Johnson. Devon, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you on today. How are you, sir?
Josh, Carlos, thanks for having me, guys. I'm great. I'm super excited to hear who the exciting guest is. Who's coming on? I want to hear all about it.
It's you.
It's me? All right. Well,
Well played.
I don't want to get people too amped for me. You said there was an exciting guest and then you introduced me. So, I don't know if they're misled or not, but I appreciate you guys having me on tonight. I really do. And yes, Winchester Native. And I've never, more than like 3 hours from Winchester, never been able to escape it. I'm in the circumference pretty much my entire life. So
we keep bringing you back.
I'm not complaining. I love it. I love Winchester.
It's a good place to live.
Yeah. So, it's been sort of an interesting season for United. Unfortunately, they did not make it into the playoffs. I know Carlos
barely.
Yeah. They barely did.
Barely missed it.
It's called decision day. And so many things had to go into place that didn't happen for DC United. But Devon, can you just go back and briefly recap the season for DC United for us?
Yeah, it was a transition period. So, DC United had been with the head coach, Ben Olsen, who was a player before he became an assistant coach for a rough 4 to 6 months, and then was launched into the head coaching role back in 2010, I want to say. Yeah, 2010. So it had been 10 years that he had been at the helm of DC United, and they had success, got into the playoffs, had some poor years. And so when the front office decided to make a change last year, it was a lot of, I would say, just kind of maybe some excitement, just because I think some supporters were wanting to see a new style, to see a new coach, but a lot of anxiety and angst about who are they going to hire? Are they going to make the right decision? And ultimately it ended up falling, and it was a long process. And I think for anyone who watched the sport, who watched MLS last year, there was a really long off season because so the last game was early December, and it was the longest off season on record. They started in mid-April, and the reason for that was basically COVID. They wanted more people in the stands, kind of waiting for a vaccine to come out, and so they were kind of trying to push the start of the season as much as possible, which allowed DC United the luxury of doing really in-depth analysis, kind of spreading their net out even further than they probably had anticipated or expected to, given that they were probably most likely looking at the start of a season of end of February, early March is what it typically is. So that extra 6 weeks or so, I know the front office just, turned over every rock, and they ended up finding a jewel under a stone in second division in Belgium.
Yeah.
Carlos, I don't know how they found this guy. It really
I don't
does
know
come
either.
down to network. It comes down to analytics, but it comes down to relationships too. And I can tell you, if anyone who watches DC United, they've heard of a name, Fred Briant, who happened to play at this club, second division in Belgium a couple years ago.
Mm.
I'd say like 5 years ago now. And he played with one Argentine player who was a playmaker named Hernan Lasada. And they happened to have connections to an agent. And so DC United, there's an agent who called DC United and said, hey, Fred used to play with this guy. They asked Fred about him. They said, yeah, he's a pretty good player, up and coming coach, call our agent. Things happened pretty quick from that standpoint. Once they interviewed him, they knew exactly he was the man. And what he did was implemented a little bit different of a style. So rather than, sit back and defend and hope to score on a counter, which is what DC had been done effectively had done over the course of the past 10 years, they're on the front foot. They're getting after you. They're pressing you. They're picking you up, full man-to-man coverage, if you will, just like in basketball when I was playing at James Wood 20-some years ago. In your face, high energy. And it's an exciting brand of soccer. It's kind of new aged. And it led to a lot of success. It led to a lot of goals. It led to a lot of really good games, specifically at Audi Field. It re-energized, I think, the fan base. What was that, Carlos?
I said it's best place. It's the best place. I love Audi Field. I love it.
It's very cool. And if anyone listening has yet to check it out, it's an intimate, unique, and exciting venue. And I say exciting because you're literally on top of the players. Yeah. Like there's not a bad seat. You can get the dollar seat with a free beer, right? And you're still going to have a fantastic view. And so, having said all that, there was a lot of great games. They kind of got on the national stage again, which DC United had been on previous in their history, and but they didn't make the playoffs. And that decision day was a memorable one. A lot of stuff needed to fall into place. DC United was able to get their result, a 3-1 win over Toronto in Toronto, and pretty much took care of business easily there. But they needed their arch rival New York Red Bulls to lose, and they ended up tying, which is just a little bit. Not only did they not make the playoffs, but the New York Red Bulls, the nemesis of DC United, was the one to take their spot. So a lot of positives. I think there's a lot of looking forward to 2022, seeing this style implemented, a second year under Hernan Lasada, the head coach. Everyone will be a little bit smarter. There's not going to be the learning curve, maybe some new acquisitions in the off season. So hopefully. Yeah. And so, I mean, you say it with every off season, right? For any team. So it'll be interesting, but yeah, they missed out on the playoffs by a measly point, but that goes to show you, and not just in soccer, but literally every game does matter. And so you can look back, obviously it's never a good idea, but you look back and just one or two just bad decisions, misguided plays, just kind of led them to fall just short of making the playoffs.
Yep. Very good recap there. I was able to catch some games. And
it's almost like he does it professionally.
The problem is we have a lot of games, right? And like I can't remember every little moment. So and then you're always hesitant, especially like on a broadcast, to like you'll start a thought and you're like, oh wait, I'm not 100% confident. Let me just back out of this a little bit and
I'll hold that one back.
Yeah. Let me reel that one in. So Dave, your turn. You just keep talking.
So Devon, I have to ask. I ask everybody the same question, and it's getting tiring. And I hope there's a day and a time where I don't have to ask this question anymore. But with this COVID-19 pandemic, it has brought changes to our sporting world. And I have seen some of your broadcasts and how you are broadcasting remotely when DC United is away. And so I sort of want to know, what are the challenges that COVID has taken in regards to like broadcasting, what's it like broadcasting off a monitor? Because I know soccer is a pretty big sport played on a pretty big pitch. Yes,
Yeah.
Carlos, I said it correctly. But I mean, what did I
He
mean?
didn't call
What?
you out. He didn't call you out, man. He's taught you well.
I've
Yeah,
called about before. I've called about before.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
no, he would have called me out if I said field or something. That's why I said pitch. But so,
Yeah.
anyways, I mean, just take us through what some of the challenges were when dealing with this pandemic. I know there's sort of like a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm hoping one day we can get through this, but at least we still have sports.
Yeah, it was a rough few months there back in 2020. I mean, obviously, stuff was happening far bigger than sports that, you know, unfortunately influenced a lot of lives for the negative. And so we are fortunate to have sports back, and but it has changed a lot, and it's been kind of unique to adapt to it. I think one of the big things we actually, I know most sports now are, as you just mentioned, we're staying at home calling games off of a monitor, not traveling with the team. DC United actually started doing that a couple years ago. You cannot replicate being on site, being able to view the full field, being able to see plays develop, and not just from a director standpoint, right? Not just from a viewer standpoint, where you've got, you know, the 30-yard shot. If you, you know, so especially in my role as a analyst, being able to see runs develop from 30 yards, you can't do that on the monitor, and it's difficult to kind of replace being in the stadium, because you certainly can't do that. But one of the big things that we've kind of missed out on is really just interacting with the team. So, you know, I'd be able to go attend practices and see their last day before games, you know, the training session last day before games, be able to talk to players, you know, up close and personal, and not just like, not you know, formal inside of the Zoom conference setting, just more of a, hey, here I'm at the field, how's life, you know, what's going on off the field, all these little things. And not that I'm looking for something to bring up during a broadcast, but all that can play into how they're playing, how they're performing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't always come across in conferences. So in regards to kind of calling a game off of the monitor, it is good for my personal life, because we're you know, I don't know, I mentioned before we started recording, but I have 2 kids under the age of 4, and you know, so it's nice to be able to go call a game on a Saturday night and come home and then wake up and obviously be there and be able to help out. And so I remember a few years ago when we were still traveling, I want to say like 5 red eyes in a row one weekend. Yeah, it was, I mean, not like back to back, but like 5 weekends in a row there on the West Coast, I'd fly red eye. And so it's good on the body. It's good for the home life. But it's, you know, the challenges I kind of discussed too, right? Is like you're watching a director shot. And the thing too is that we're not actually, the director that I work with, he's not the one shooting. We're going off the home feed. So they'll literally just throw up a headshot, or, you know, a headshot of the goalie, and you're like, okay, this isn't what I was really referring to or talking about. And then I've got to pivot. You're only looking at 30 yards of the field rather than, you know, the full 110, 140, whatever it may be. And then I always find this too. Every game is kind of shot differently, right? Like some are true to soccer, where it's like wide shot almost all the time, because you're seeing the play developed. And then when you know with 100% certainty there's a dead ball, they'll zoom in either on a certain player, on something off the ball, whatever it may be. With when you're watching a game and the team's away and it's a director that you're unfamiliar with, like, I mean, I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but there will be literally, we would count 40 coaches shots. Now, for those listeners who aren't really familiar with soccer, it's nonstop. I don't need to see the coach 40 times over the course of 90 minutes. So I just want to see the play unravel. So it's kind of being able to adapt on the fly like that too, right? And then the last thing is kind of just energy. You're not in the stadium, you're in a booth.
You can't feel the crowd.
You can't feel the crowd. You can't like literally feel the energy when you're at home in Audi Field and maybe a shot hits a target and you can just feel the energy rise, then that really picks up your energy and your tone as well. And you know, when you're in a booth as good as Dave Johnson and is getting his energy level up, and I can never match that, it's difficult to be in a box, if you will, and watching a game and trying to match what you think the energy level should be, because it doesn't come naturally.
The energy level is probably pretty high when DC United scores a goal and you're standing right next to Dave Johnson when he's doing his iconic "it's in the net" call.
Yeah, it's you know, as Dave Johnson says, it's not a DC United goal unless he says it's in the net. So if I don't hear it's in the net, I assume it just hit the side of the net or something like that, right? And so it's to say the energy level goes to the roof, specifically at Audi Field, it certainly does. And so, you know, a little bit of background on that, it's in the net. I can't tell the story because that's Dave's whole thing. But I grew up in Winchester, obviously, so I would watch DC United games. And like, I remember in the first season, 1996, where I'd watch a DC United game on a Saturday night. The next morning I'd go out, or I'd go to a practice, or I'd go to a game, and like, we'd be saying like, it's in the net, it's in the net. So being able to stand up there next to him as he's making his iconic call is it never gets old. It never gets old.
I mean,
it's like a surreal feeling.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool.
I mean, it was so popular they even made shirts for it. Is that true?
Yeah, that was my fault. So we no, it was all for a good cause. So we and I was going to surprise him with it, but we decided not to do that. So there was one of the founding supporters of DC United started La Barra Brava. Rob Gillespie, Big Rob. He really was the impetus for the supporters culture, one of the impetus of the supporters culture for DC United, in which anyone kind of listening, again, not familiar with DC United, they kind of laid the foundation of what a supporters group should be. So they're banging drums, they're lighting flares, and as a player, I mean, and every time anyone would go to anyone go to DC United game, like when I was playing, even like families, I remember growing up when I was a kid, and families be like, yeah, we went to the game and we sat the opposite side, but the other side was really cool looking. I want to sit over there one time, right? And so like this guy Rob Gillespie was Big Rob was the one who kind of ushered that into MLS and that sort of culture and support of DC United. And he'd been dealing with cancer, and we just want to do a fundraiser. And I thought, what better way to do a fundraiser than to put Dave Johnson's face on his shirt? And then, you know, obviously putting "it's in the net." I should have worn it. Why didn't I wear it? And and obviously we put "it's in the net." And I wasn't, because for like content purposes, I had to actually ask his permission to do it. And we sold quite a few, raised a lot of money, and I think it's time we need to do that again. Maybe for another cause.
I'm definitely buying one. I'm definitely buying one.
I will be buying one as well.
Yeah, I think we need a little bit more marketing behind it. Maybe keep the window open a little bit longer. But I know we've had a lot of people actually over the past year ask about it, because I wear it a lot too. And so, it's you know, I walk around with Dave Johnson on my chest all the time. So tells you what I think about him.
What's it called? So you started being a color commentator with Dave Johnson in 2016, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So you started calling games at RFK.
Yeah.
So what is the difference between Audi Field's booth compared to RFK's booth?
Yeah. So RFK is iconic to me, and it's going to be knocked down within the next, I want to say, year and a half or so. Next year,
I think in a few months. I think they're planning to do it in January.
Don't blow it for me, really. I just still need to.
They're literally going to blow it for you, but
oh gosh, yeah, so that's the stadium I grew up going to, and that's the stadium I played in.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. I mean, I really did, and I didn't know any different. I didn't know what Audi Field was going to be like, but we played in some new stadiums, but it just didn't have what RFK had, and there's just been a ton of history there across everything. The stands bounce, which apparently isn't the code anymore. I don't know, but It
I miss
was
that. I will say that's one thing I do miss about RFK is the bouncing stands. It's one thing that I wish Audi Field had, but of course it can't have that.
yeah, I know. I think the engineers kind of nixed that one, but I thought the same thing. I was like, whatever they put, whatever they do with Audi Field or whatever it was going to be called at the time, you know, when I'm thinking of when I heard that they were going to build a new stadium, was like, you just need to have bouncing stands because, I mean, as a player, you see that and the drums would be in rhythm to the stands, and it was just, you know, I don't know why I never had any concern about it collapsing. I probably should have, but it no, it just made for a fantastic atmosphere. So, you know, I say this with I loved RFK. Having said that, it was a baseball diamond. So it was built to be a baseball field.
Yeah.
And so we are where we had to walk across a little bridge, if you will, to get to the booth, and then you had to like literally duck under this big old I-beam. I'm people are listening. I'm using my hands to explain this. That's not helping them at all. But it's probably like 5 feet high, and you had to duck underneath of it. And then you get in there, and it's like super tight, and you're kind of far from the field. Granted, we're around the halfway line, but I don't want to say it was difficult to call a game. You weren't right on top of it. Whereas Audi Field, man, goodness me, Dave must have put it in his contract because we have the best seat in the house. We're right at half field. We're a perfect sight line. It's an impeccable view, and probably would be at a very expensive suite if they decided to change it to a suite to watch the game. But far less WASP. We had some WASP outings at RFK that we were just dodging. I remember there for a couple summers in a row.
What?
Yeah. You're just trying to dodge it. I'm doing a little left to right, trying to dodge as you're trying to keep your train of thought going. No AC, got crazy hot in there. DC summer, tight little box, no AC. So it was and I don't know if you were ever to look back at video, like the shot between Dave and me or whoever the color analyst was at the time, it's like super tight. So you're shoulder to shoulder, and it's super, I mean, there's a reason for that because there wasn't any other space to go. like we would have like a little bit of space to move to our left and right, but for a shot, the camera couldn't move back any further. So we had to really be a super tight shot. So let's just say that Audi Field is a massive improvement from a boost standpoint. But again, the history of RFK and kind of the vibe and the culture there was just something that I'll always relish, being able to not only play in, but broadcast there and then even visit too, growing up.
Well, I mean, I remember, what year was it? It was we made the playoffs one year. We were playing the Red Bulls, and it was the year NBC was like, big NBC was covering it. They had the MLS rights. I remember they came to, obviously, to cover the game. They weren't even in the booth. They were on the sidelines on the field calling the game. So I was like, is the booth, like, did something happen to the booth? Like, is it that bad? Like, what happened?
Yeah, they had a really cool setup, and I guess they took this from NBC's the hockey, right? So they would put the analysts, which still fathoms me. They'd put it was Kyle Martino, and I'm assuming this is what you're referring to. They would put the analyst right in between the benches, so on the field. And then the the play-by-play was up in the booth, and so they would play off of each other. But being able to trying to like analyze Kyle Martino, who was with NBC at the time, he did a fantastic job of analyzing the game from ground level. Which I know it's really great to see the game, any game, NBA, hockey, whatever it is, NFL, right at the right at field level. But it's hard to see plays develop. So it was they did a really good job with it. I prefer to kind of be up a little bit, have a better angle, and that way you can see. That way you can see. So, yeah.
I think for that game though, I think they were both on the field.
They were,
I think so. If I remember correctly, they were both down there. But
they could have walked up there and been like, "No, I'm good, man."
They were just like,
or they didn't.
It was a cold night though. It was a very cold night. I remember that much.
What was that? 2012, I want to say. Would that have made sense?
Either 2012 or 20. No, 2012. 2012. It would be 2012.
Yeah, fact check me on that one. I could be off.
So, I sort of want to, yeah, how did it go from your time playing in the MLS with DC United? How did that transition go from being a player to being an analyst?
Oh man, yeah. So it wasn't a smooth one. Let's just say that. So it was for those who don't know, and which I would assume most people, I stopped playing in 2011. So we had 5 years gap there, and it was kind of one of those things where I remember when I was done playing, I had a bad concussion, so I was out for the better part of like 6 months, I want to say. So I started to like, while I'm trying to recover because I can't really do anything, I'm trying to think about kind of like what's next, right? What am I going to do? And I always liked, always thought that maybe being like a color analyst would be a fun thing to do, and that sort of thing. So I remember after the season, I approached our comms director, who kind of like, provides guidance on who should be the analyst, and um, didn't work out for me. They were like, "We're gonna go with someone else." Totally fine, right? It's one thing to go from like, "Hey, you're sharing the locker room and playing with this team," to like the next year you're calling games and trying to separate yourself from what's happening in the locker room, even though you know all the players. And so they went a different direction. Obviously, totally fine. I get a call basically out of the blue, and I'd done some like light stuff before with MLS, nothing in terms of like broadcasting, but interviews and stuff like that. And so I was just trying to keep kind of like my toe in the door a little bit, and then I just get a call out of the blue, and leading up to the 2016 season. And so, is this something you'd be interested? Yeah, I'd love to be considered for it. And then they're like, well, we're still talking to a few other people, and they have experience and you don't, and et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, they pulled my name out of a hat. And I to be quite frank, I didn't have any experience, so I actually watched the first two games of the season, just like being in booth, seeing what it's like to like talk with a director, producer, getting to hang out with Dave. And then from there on, it was like, all right, let's go get it. And so um, Dave Johnson has been influential in terms of how I go about preparing, what to say, how, not necessarily what to say, but how to say it, how to deliver. Obviously, I have a ton of work to do still. It can always be better, but his big thing is, it's two guys just watching a game, and he makes you feel that way. Like if you say something maybe doesn't come off, or it's flat, not a good point, he doesn't necessarily call you out on. He just keeps going, show must go on sort of attitude. And he just is always providing pointers. And so it was an interesting transition too, because there was a gap, right? So like the league had changed in the 5 years that I'd left. So I've been watching, I was still keeping up with it. And but I didn't necessarily have the relationships. And so like trying to build those relationships back again, and like trying to get insight in terms of tactics and that sort of thing that you may not necessarily see as the typical viewer. It took some time. So as I said, it's always a work in progress, and always a work in progress, except for Dave. He figured it out.
Well, I mean, yeah, you're doing pretty good. So I'm a fan of what you and Dave are doing up there.
You have to say that, man, because you invited me on. You have to say that. But I appreciate it. I do. I do.
But no, I mean, I enjoy watching the games when you and Dave are calling. So I mean,
good.
I don't mind it.
No, I appreciate that. And in today's world, it's pretty easy to give your opinion too, right? And so in the Twitter sphere or whatever it may be. So fortunately, I think just our kind of rapport, and mostly because it's just Dave just being charming, is he's great to work with. And so it's pretty positive feedback. It's we're just trying to have some fun, and as Dave always talks about, it's 2 hours to shut the world off, so let's just try to enjoy it. So
absolutely. Yeah, I know DC United games, soccer game 90 minutes long, divided up into two 45-minute halves. What's the prep work like for you going into a game that you're calling? I mean, when does the process usually start? How much time are you spending prepping for the next game you're going to call? Because I'm sure prepping for a soccer game is pretty complicated as in comparison to some other sports as well.
Yeah, I would I'd say it's not it's probably as complicated as like NFL, because you're like it's 11 players,
Yeah,
and like it's not like 11, it's not 22 players, it's not an offense and a defense. So trying to remember, trying to remember every little
that's
thing.
true.
Yeah, no, but it is. And recently and because of COVID and like congested schedules, there used to just be 3 subs, so it was like pretty easy, man. Like, you got like you know who the you know who the players are going to be. Now it's like, now we got 5 subs and there's line changes, and so yeah, but it is a lot of prep work, and I think that's something, I don't want to say I underestimated it, but I don't think I knew how much prep work was going to go into kind of every match. And it really is when the season starts, and I say starts, it's preseason, because that's when I have to start preparing through the last game. I mean, you're reading articles every day, you're watching games every day, and leading up, literally, just like if they play a Saturday to Saturday, I'll start preparing we start preparing as a team, as a production team, on a Monday. We have a Monday call. What do we want to talk about? What do we want to look for, et cetera, about an hour long, 45 to an hour long call. And then Tuesday through Friday is really just like watching the game over, the game that they previously played, watching the opponent. What are their styles? Are they playing at home? Okay, I need to watch one home game, because they're going to play different at home than they are away. Then, for the most part, because I follow MLS pretty closely, although it's getting harder with all the teams they have now. Now they have 27.
Yeah, now they added Charlotte.
They keep adding them, man. Yeah, right. they just keep adding them, man. Throw them in there, dude. Let's keep it going. So I'm pretty familiar with most players, but knowing the finer details and kind of their tendencies and that sort of thing outside, I always try to avoid the national narrative as much as possible, like what players are typically like, just based on like national analysts. Obviously you're going to hear some of that in one ear, but you also want to provide your own opinion on what you're kind of viewed during your research as well. So I mean, it's a full-on process from literally starting on Monday. I take Sundays off. Sometimes if the team that DC and I is going to play against next weekend is playing, I'll watch them on a Sunday, but for the most part, I try to take Sundays off, and then it's about doing research, again, watching the game and reading stats and articles, and all throughout the week, literally leading up until, the moment that we have to go live on the air.
Yeah. Wow.
And I remember none of it. I do all this research and I don't remember anything. So
Kirby, you got another question, or?
Oh, I thought you had one.
I do have one.
Go ahead.
I've got plenty of questions to ask. Why can't we get a big name designated player?
Oh man.
Just cut it straight to the point. Ever since Wayne Rooney, why can't we get a big name designated player?
Yeah, so DC United is they you look at the teams that spend big, and they spend really big in MLS, and it's an Atlanta United, it's an LA Galaxy, LAFC, New York City spends a lot of money, and then DC United, it's not that they're lower mid, right? So they're not coming in middle of the group. They're a little bit lower, and I don't know. I'm not the decision maker there, and it's not my checkbook. But what they are investing in is a lot in infrastructure, right? So they got the stadium, $500 million stadium in the heart of DC. They just built a new training facility, not far from Winchester and Leesburg.
Good old Loudoun County.
Good old Loudoun County. I know. I was joking with Dave that, man, had that been there when I was playing, I could live with my parents for 3 or 4 years, save some money rather than pay the DC or pay the district rent. So, they are investing, and I'm not. These aren't rose-colored glasses. I do believe they're investing. Now, would I love for them to go out and get another Wayne Rooney, which they absolutely knocked out of the park with him because he performed on the field.
Awesome.
Marketable off of it. I mean, like,
awesome when
I mean, they opened a new stadium. He put bottoms in the seats, and then he provided on the field, and it was just, I mean, it was a magical
Not only
time
that, like when he came in, it felt like the team like just fundamentally changed. Like
oh
something just clicked when he got there.
yeah, it's just the level of respect and the quality player he was too, right? And so like
Mm-hmm.
no, people didn't really want to disappoint him. I think there was a lot more accountability in the locker room when you have former England captain coming in. Um, you know, when Rooney says something, you listen, and so there's a bit more accountability, leadership, and then it was the excitement. It was just kind of a perfect catalyst into opening Audi Field, which, you know, they had a lot of games on the back end of that season in 2018 that were at home, and they started flying, man. And good players like to play with good players, and so Luciano Acosta, who was used to be with DC United, little Argentine magician with the ball at his feet, he hooked up with Rooney, and it was just beautiful, beautiful poetry in motion. So you know, they knocked that one out of the park. When it comes to other investments, the coach Hernan Losada has continued to ask for, lack of a better term, give me some players I would like,
Yeah.
a bit more investment. And then having said that too, man, I mean, like in any pro sports, you never know what's going to happen. Like you look at the good old Billy Beanball, Colorado Rapids, lowest payroll in MLS. They just won the Western Conference against some of the most expensive teams MLS offers. So it's interesting. It's not about, I don't think it's always about spending as much money as you can. It's about spending money right. And that's above my pay grade, and that's something that they've done. They brought a new I think her role is technically general manager, Lucy Rushton, and I think, you know, she's into analytics and finding players through databases that are going to fit the system, and can you get them on a price that, you know, DC United's comfortable with. So it's going to be an interesting offseason in 2022. I mean, I don't have all the contracts, you know, in front of me of who's up at the end of this calendar year, but I would imagine there's going to be at least 8 or 9 players that probably will not be back. And how are they going to replace them? Are they going to improve, or are they just going to find someone run of the mill?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like from like what I see, like when I see like DC United playing, like the thing that like I wish like we had more was kind of a more like creative, kind of like comfortable with the ball striker. Like what's his name? Kamara's not that bad, but and he scored a good amount of goals this season. He was what, second, third, leading scorer in the league this year.
Yeah, technically, well, I guess he tied. He just had fewer assists, so he lost the Golden Boot, most goals scored. Yeah,
but like and I went to the Nashville game a couple of weeks ago.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Why'd you do that?
I mean, it was still a good time. The atmosphere was great.
Even though it was great.
It was a 0-0 draw, but it was still good.
Yeah, Nashville just knows how to ruin a party, man. They're just boring, but yeah. It was 0-0 game for anyone listening.
From the stands, it was still a good time. Like,
that's all that matters.
Like the atmosphere was fantastic, but and I'm pretty sure that was like the biggest crowd that we had.
I think it was. Yeah.
So I went to that game, but like one thing that I noticed is he kind of disappears in some games. Like he doesn't really like get involved in the action. Like maybe like say like, you know, for instance, Ricardo Pepi on the national team, you know, or, you know, just like top level strikers, you know. And obviously another issue is like injuries this season like really hurt us, especially like Paul Arriola got hurt during that one window with the national team. Flores didn't really play that many games this season, so like
10.
Yeah, like one thing I think fitness is just like was one of the biggest issues this season, and then on top of that, I just feel like maybe we need a more creative striker up top.
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, Kamara is Ola Kamara. He scored 19 goals. Can score. I think what DC United lacks at times is just that player who just wants to take the game over. You know, it really is all about the collective, and the head coach Renato Losada preaches that. Mm-hmm. But at times, man, when the collective's just not working right, like then you just need a player to just go pick the ball up from 35 yards out and make something happen. And then DC United, I mean, they missed the playoffs by a point, and you made a good point. Like they just had a ton of injuries. I think a lot of that had to do with fitting the physical demands of the new system Hernan Losada, the head coach, has implemented, but it's also, they needed to get their bodies right for it. I don't think with this long off season they're fully prepared for that. And then it's also that it's just unfortunate. There's some stuff that's just unfortunate. And so I know they missed, I read something today about DC United had the most players miss the most games, which essentially is meaning that he had the slimmest roster to choose from.
Yeah.
All year long. And so, if they can, I know in the off season, which will be a short one this year. So the off season the new season starts February 27th, I want to say. So
early.
I know, man. It's gonna be a little chilly. Yeah, and those new booths too in Outfield, they also have heat, so that's so so we're okay with that February 27th start time. But it's it's, you're not wrong. It's getting players who, I think between Paul Arriola, Edison Flores, these are the DP players, the big players that they spend money on and who have a lot of quality and are really good. They've just, unfortunately, for the past really 2 years, they've both been hurt. And the way that MLS is structured in terms of obviously salary caps and then limited money to sign players, you've got to hit your big money signings. And that's not to say that Flores and Arriola aren't good, because Arriola is with the national team, Edison Flores is with the Peruvian national team. They just unfortunately just haven't been able to stay healthy. And when you're spending money on guys like that you want to be contributors, unfortunately, they just need to kind of stay healthy. And so again, that's not a slight on those players. They've been unfortunate. I mean, but you've got to have a lot of stuff go right in MLS too, because the margins are pretty slim, as with any league.
Yep.
So how does that work? I'm sort of, I don't really know much about the inner workings of soccer. Is there free?
This is only an MLS thing, really. It's not really a worldwide thing.
Yeah, no, MLS. Yeah, I should have rephrased MLS thing. I don't know really the inner workings, Devon, but is there a free agency when it comes to soccer? How do teams look to try to find these players, maybe a big name player like Wayne Rooney? For example, do they just decide, oh, I want to play there? How does that basically work out?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm gonna put you to sleep with it.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's an interesting process.
If this, then that. If that, then you have to go back to this. And it's man, I don't know, Josh. It's a weird thing. Let's start with something that's relatable for most any sport in America. There's a draft. There's a college draft. You can get a player from there. If you want to get a big time designated player, which is over a certain threshold of annual salary, it's deemed a designated player, and you can only have 3 of those on your roster. So I forget what it is off the top of my head. Let's just say 1.5 million, right? I don't know if it's 10 million or 1.5, although I would imagine it's closer to 1.5 than 10. You actually, if you want to sign Wayne Rooney, he's got to be out of contract, coming up on out of contract. You have to literally put a discovery right on him, meaning if I'm the GM at DC United and you're trying to go after Wayne Rooney, you go to the league and say, hey, I want his discovery rights. I want to try to sign Wayne Rooney. A lot of times big names like that, MLS is heavily involved too, because there's probably more to it than just an annual salary. There might be some marketing dollars behind it as well. And then moves within the league are Carlos, do I get into GAM and TAM or no? Do I get into GAM and TAM? No.
I don't think so. I think that'll be a little too technical.
Basically what we call commissioner dollars. Be like, I'll trade you 2 cones for some extra dollars, and then so it's flipping. So you can do interconference, you can do inter-team trades, you can sign college players, you can sign through free agency. Wayne Rooney could have been a free agent, right? You can sign through there is free agency in MLS now, so players who have been in the league for a certain amount of time are eligible to be free agents. Now that number's like 30, age 30, and like 8 years of experience, so it takes some time to get there. So there's different avenues to go about it. But, if you're going after a Lionel Messi, if you're going after Ronaldo, if you're going after Wayne Rooney, the league is really implemental. And I say the league as in like the league front office too, like the commissioner, they're influential in terms of sorting that sort of signing out as well, because it's not only good for a team, it's good for the entire league.
Do you think the MLS is eventually gonna like get off of this kind of like micromanaging of like the finances of all the clubs? Because obviously the reason why they were doing was because they were a startup league, and they wanted to make sure that all these teams didn't fold, and given what happened to some of the earlier teams, MLS, they wanted to just make sure that everybody kind of made it. But with how fast the sport is growing in America and how big it's starting to get in the MLS, I mean, I think we're about like related. I think we're equivalent to like the second division in England, like, and they're saying that one day we'll probably be as big as the Premier League. That's in the future, of course. That's not maybe anytime soon, but I mean, do you think one day they're going to eventually let like these clubs like not have to be worrying about like, oh, you can only pay 3 guys like above this threshold, and like actually let these teams be like the European teams where they can just buy any player they want and not have to really go through like all the minute details of certain things?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know what MLS got to where they are with 2022 will have 28 teams. Before I started playing, they got down to 10, literally owned by 3 people. So they retracted in order to grow, and so they there's a bigger plan that I obviously don't know about. I think when you ask about free spending, I think part of the allure and the brand of MLS is that on any given day, a team can beat any team, right? So every game, everyone, albeit with some caveats, has a fair playing ground, right? So I don't think they want to get to the point, and this just me. I think from an entertainment standpoint, it's more entertaining for a Nashville, a smaller market team, to be able to beat a team from New York City because they're on an even playing field. I think they're trying to avoid probably a New York Yankee situation that one team or 2 teams are winning the title every year because they just have an exorbitant amount of money. I mean, you look at the EPL and there's basically 4 teams, maybe 5 teams who realistically can win, and after a third of the season, who the final 2 or 3 are.
It's halfway City pretty much every year, but
every year, and halfway through the season, it's down to 2 teams, and if it's down to 2 teams, so I don't know. I kind of, there's a lot of confusion with player movement, a lot of questions around that, because I think it'd be far easier to understand and comprehend, but from my understanding, the brand is on any given day anyone can win, and that makes it exciting. And if you don't win, you could potentially lose out on the playoffs, which is the ultimate goal, and you could lose that by 1 point like DC United did. So time will tell.
Yeah, so Devon, I'd sort of like to go back to your playing career. You went to WVU, West Virginia University, beautiful campus now. Played soccer there from 2002 to 2005. I sort of want to get your thoughts about what it was like playing for a big school like West Virginia, and then from there, I know you played in the Premier Development League for the Boulder Rapids Reserve. Tell us, was that like an in-between between WVU to the MLS? What was that like?
Yeah, so you're right, man. WVU, I mean, beautiful campus. And I had never been there until my recruiting trip. And I mean, I grew up in north side of Winchester, so I was 6 miles from West Virginia, so like obviously knew the state well. And so that was the only call I got from, I just dreamed of playing Division I soccer, and that was the only call I got. Like, I mean, I'm not to like say that I should have gotten 20, 15, 30 calls, whatever it may have been, that was the only one I got. So they were like, hey, do you want to come up and visit? And I was like, yes, I'll come. So went up there, and then they, you know, I was pretty fortunate. After my visit, they called me a couple days after, and I was fortunate to get a little scholarship up there. And so, you know, I could have played it cool and been like, wait, I'm going to wait to hear what these other schools say. But in reality, they were the only ones that were calling me. So I jumped at the opportunity to go up to West Virginia. And what I was looking for too was just a Division I school in a good conference that was really bad. And what I mean by that is because I just wanted to play. Like, I just wanted the experience of playing Division I soccer in a big conference. And at the time, you know, I wasn't greedy. You know, I just wanted like just a big school with a big conference and being able to play as a freshman. That's not greedy at all, right? And so I was like, let's get. Ideally, it would like to be like a bottom dweller of the conference. And I didn't know about West Virginia where they stood in the Big East. Turns out they were the bottom dweller at the time of the Big East Conference when I was, you know, asked to come up and join them. And so when I got there, actually a new coach took over my first year. You know, we were able to ultimately go from, I think we had like 5 wins my first year as a freshman to second round of the NCAA tournament my senior year. So it was a work in progress the entire time, but it was exactly what I wanted. I just wanted a big school. I wanted to play soccer, and I wanted to play in a big conference, which, you know, at the time Big East was a big conference, and we were able to kind of lay a bit of a foundation for the time. The 4 years I was at West Virginia, and they're back in the tournament now. Actually, a former DC United player and former teammate of mine at West Virginia is a coach there, and so he's doing a good job. And they're back in the NCAA tournament now, so we were able to kind of lay a foundation, I think, with that group of people we had. Having said that, between my sophomore and my junior year, I was invited to play this Premier Development League, and I liked it too. So the Royals in Winchester, you know, like Summer League baseball.
Oh yeah, exactly. I love those games.
Yeah, man.
I love those
yeah,
games.
so it was exactly it. My coach at West Virginia, he actually used to coach the team out in Boulder, Colorado. And he was like, hey, I want you to go out there and play. And I'm like, okay, yeah. Live in Boulder for a summer. I don't know if you've ever been out to Colorado, but in the summer, it's gorgeous. So went out there, played with them, and it was like some of the best. I mean, I honestly think I only got to play in like half the games because the talent was ridiculous. Like we had, I think like 10 or 11 guys, I want to say, went on to play MLS from that team. Mm-hmm. So it just, you know, what I thought was like a good level at West Virginia, which it was, playing in the Big East, this was getting all these talented players together, it was awesome. So, and on top of that, being able to live in Boulder, Colorado for a summer. So that's kind of what it was just kind of, some players, they were actually the MLS team there, Colorado Rapids, would pick certain players who've been performing well and have them come train with them for a week. I was never one of those players, but that's okay. And so yeah, it was a cool, like it was a pretty professional environment, playing with some really cool players, really great players. And so it was a unique experience. We ended up actually losing in the title game to I don't even know. I don't remember who you lost to in the title game. Doesn't matter, but it was cool. It was a fun summer.
That's pretty cool. And then in 2006, you get drafted in the MLS supplemental draft by DC United. Obviously, getting drafted by DC United, probably a great accomplishment for you, Devon. What was the draft like? I know these big drafts like the NFL, NBA drafts. What's the MLS draft like?
Yeah. So just envision like the NFL draft, right? With like your agent and like every family member and friend, like in a huge mansion somewhere, like the complete opposite of that. Okay. So it was like,
I was like, I wonder how he's going to describe this one.
yeah, the complete opposite of that, Josh. So, so there was a combine. So they invite, I want to say at the time it was top 40 college players got to go to a combine in Florida in early January, and all the MLS coaches were there and took their little scratch pads and watched and judged and took notes and got to interview players they were interested in, et cetera, et cetera. I was not invited to that. So I actually had an opportunity to go just train with the team over in Belgium, which actually anyone kind of paying attention to the Champions League, I was able to train for 2 weeks while the combine was going on. I took my first 2 weeks off of my January or my spring semester, which was in January, and went to go train with this team called Club Bruges, which is over in Belgium. Um, Little did I know they're a Champions League team, which means like they're like one of the top two teams in Belgium and Champions League pretty much every year, if not every other year. I was just like, yeah, man, let's go play over there. I'll go play over there and train. And so I come back and the combine had been over. The draft had not yet happened, but I got back and I literally landed and I spent the night at my parents' house in Winchester. Drove to West Virginia to start my classes, which I was 2 weeks late on my spring semester. I get a call from DC United, and they're like, "Hey," actually, I had a call from my agent and was like, "Hey, DC United is just doing like a little like college, like local college kids. They can come out and just train with them and stuff. And I'd like you to go out there and just see if anything comes of it." Yeah. So I did. It was in an indoor facility, which is not my forte. It's not how I know the game. I play on a 80 by 20 yard field, not a indoor oval. And it was just 2 days of just playing. So I go back to school and was like, all right, I'll just focus on school this semester and figure out if I want to keep playing, whatever. I'm sitting in a class, mind you, picture the opposite of a mansion with your agent and everyone else. I'm sitting in class and my flip phone at the time starts vibrating, and I turn it off. I remember turning it off. I'm showing everyone who's listening to the podcast that I'm turning off my phone, and it vibrates again, and I'm like, okay, cool. So I pick it up this time, and I see a 202 number, which is area code is Washington, D.C. And I knew that because my sister was living in D.C. And I was like, well, my sister wouldn't be calling me, and she wouldn't be calling me from this number. What in the world? So I decided to leave the class, and I pull out my phone and they had a voicemail. The first time they didn't leave a voicemail, the second time they did. And hey, this is Tommy Stone, head coach of or the assistant coach of DC United, and just want to let you know that we just drafted you.
Wow.
I was like, because there was like two levels of draft too, of the draft too, Josh, right? There was like the super draft, which is for the super players, and there's like the supplemental, which is like the scrubs. So I got drafted in the supplemental, and they that was it. I mean, I literally went back to class. I was like, cool.
I guess I'm a DC United player now.
don't mind me. Just gonna squeeze back to my middle row seat and just try to pay attention to what's going on here. And my head is spinning a million miles an hour. And so I called him back after the class was over, and ended up getting the details from the team admin and everything. And I want to say like 3 days later, I was down in Florida training with the likes of Ben Olsen, who I've been watching, Jaime Moreno. So it was a fun day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, like, talking about the draft, though, do you think like we're gonna eventually like move on from like the whole draft system and like go to like what like Europe does, where they just scout? I mean, it seems like we're already kind of doing that with. I mean, we got Kevin. How do you say his last name?
Paredes.
Yeah. He's only 18 years old, and obviously he didn't go through. He's playing for the first team. I mean, and he's doing really well. But like, do you think we're going to eventually like move out of this whole making kids go to college and, kind of making it, I guess, more accessible for maybe kids that can't go to college and go through that route to the MLS?
Yeah, it's an interesting model of how sports have kind of in the US have had, for lack of better term, I mean, like free development, right? I mean, like Dallas Cowboys, they don't put anything in development of players. They don't spend $1 on it, right? Like, I mean, other than marketing probably camps and stuff in the summer in Dallas, it all comes down to the youth teams, the middle, high school, college. They're the ones paying for it. So soccer internationally has been, we're gonna get you at age 8, and then we're gonna develop you, And the ultimate goal is to have you play for our first team. And we've essentially bought you through these years of development, which is far cheaper than going out to buy a $20 million player, $50 million player. So when, MLS started, the draft was a must, and because college was developing these players, and rightfully so. I still think there's a lot of room for college players because there's still successful ones playing in college that go on to have successful careers in Major League Soccer. So I think the ultimate path will just be directly through the academy. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think, and I'd like to come back to this in 10 years and see how wrong I am, but I don't think the college draft will be around in 10 years. I think players from like a DC United academy will go on to play at George Mason, West Virginia, UVA. And then when they're done playing, if DC United come back and say, hey, come back to your home, because they do own their rights. And we're already starting to see this. So, and those others who maybe a DC United player academy player who went to UVA and DC United doesn't want him, I think he would potentially then become a free agent with the ability to sign anywhere else. So I don't know if the draft is something that I could see, 10 years from now.
So, and Loudoun United is they're just the USL team, right? That's like affiliated to DC United.
Correct.
Do you think like DC? I mean, I'm pretty sure DC United is already kind of using them as like kind of to develop younger talent and like give them playing, because I think Kevin even played on that team for 4 games, I think.
Yeah.
But do you think like more like that's gonna be kind of more the route? Like we're gonna have the second team, like I said, like the Loudoun United, and that's basically how we're gonna start bringing guys in, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's kind of the idea behind it. It's a model that works in Europe. It's not like new to the US. And so, a lot of times they'll have like U23, like Barcelona, Man United will have a U23 team, which, anyone under the age of 23 can play on it. And it just allows them to continue to get minutes, be under the watchful eye of the coaching staff, and hopefully ultimately make the jump to the first team. So that's what Loudoun United is there for, just to give minutes, not only to like young players, maybe DC United signs. So, but maybe some youngsters that are 16 in the academy and, hey, why don't you come up and, we'll not necessarily sign you, but we'll have you play with Loudoun United, just to kind of get your feet wet, if you will. And so, it likens to AAA baseball, right? So maybe someone rehabbing goes and gets, 18 innings in or whatever down in any AAA league. That happens with DC United and Loudoun as well. And then obviously trying to groom some young players, give them more minutes, because it's not always, I think there's a little less focus on win-losses, more focus on development. Yeah. So, the first team coach may not be comfortable with an 18-year-old player when he needs 3 points in a match. But he still wants to get the 18-year-old player minutes. So let's get him down to Loudoun United in a professional environment against quality players, against quote unquote men, right, who are trying to earn their paycheck to feed their families. And I use men in quotation marks for those who are. So it's just all about development. And then kind of, I think from a business standpoint, extending the brand as well. At Segra Field there in Loudoun, it's a nice little field, a nice little option for people in the Loudoun County and Leesburg area to go out and watch some high-level soccer in an intimate venue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, Carlos, because I was literally just about to ask about Loudoun United. I was looking just randomly on Ticketmaster one night, and I see Loudoun United, and I'm like, what the heck is Loudoun United? And I have to Google Maps their stadium. It looks like a pretty small stadium. It's not anything too fancy, but
it's not as big as Audi Field, that's for sure.
I've never been there. Is it? Have you been to one, Devon? What is that experience like, going to a Loudoun United?
I have not either.
Next question.
No.
Next question. No, I haven't. I haven't had the chance to get there. No, I really haven't. And a lot of it was, COVID last year. This year, I'm gone, every weekend, or, every Saturday night, basically. So, off chance I have an off Saturday night, it's not in the best interest of sometimes I need a break from soccer, but it's not in the best. I would, it's not in the best decision to say, babe, I'm going to go watch a soccer game tonight.
Yeah.
So although, my kids are getting older, I think it'd be a cool venue to go out and see. And I know the Washington Spirit too, the women's team, they play out there occasionally as well.
We're in the final, by the way.
Dude, I know. Don't you know it? Yeah. It's been a year for them, man. They're making it happen.
Yeah, it's been a year for them for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, all that stuff and selling the whole portion of the team, whatever's going on out there. I mean, it just looked like, oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
I looked and I was like, black cloud on the Washington football team and the black cloud over the NWSL team, the Washington Spirit. But
yeah,
I mean, looking at the NWSL, do you pay attention to them much? Do you really follow them at all? And if so, what are kind of the differences you see between not that it's just men and women's league, but what are some of the differences in gameplay you see?
Josh, I would love to answer this question, and I'm a terrible ambassador of soccer because I don't watch much of the Spirit. And that's not to say I don't want to. I mean, I have two little girls. Trust me, I've tried to. They're under the age of 4. I've talked about trying to get them out to a game. The only game that we could have gotten them to was at 2:00 on Halloween, which is a tough one when your 4-year-old, almost 4-year-old, has been talking about dressing up for the better part of 4 weeks. So,
oh my gosh.
And yeah, the excitement was out of the world. So, what I do, and I don't want to pretend to be any sort of expert because I'm not, but the NWSL it's interesting because the women's team, man, like the women's national team, I mean, they're the best in the world.
Oh yeah.
It's not.
They're it's bringing in the World Cup. It's not.
I mean, we'll talk about right. We'll talk about the Olympics and they didn't get gold, but I mean they are the gold standard that every country in the world wants to replicate. And so the NWSL, you can go to a game and watch the Spirit play it loud, and I mean you're going to see literally some of the best players in the world playing in those games. I mean, and so unfortunately, I with DC United keeping me busy and trying to keep up with MLS and stuff, I just don't have enough bandwidth to, I hate using that word, but enough bandwidth to like keep up with NWSL. But I will say that those players, if you have a chance to watch them, they're some of the best in the world.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And they're in the final. Speeder in the final, man. They're going
incredible.
they're going for a trophy.
That's
with everything that's gone on this year, they're going for a trophy.
I hope they bring it home.
I know, man. That'd be sweet.
I guess my last question is how long until we bring that brand new MLS Cup trophy home?
Man,
because I mean we got the 2 original designs. We need the new design because last time, dude, what was it, 04 was the last time we won one?
04. Yeah, it's banned. I know. It's a hard league, and what they keep doing is just adding more teams, which makes it even harder, dude. So it's like I don't know. I don't have a timeline. What's yours? What's your thought, Carlos? And then Josh, I want to hear yours too. Sorry, but he's the one who asked the question.
I mean, I would hope that we can win one within like maybe the next 5 years, but
yeah,
it just depends on how things kind of go in terms of like, development. Do we bring in a big name player like the likes of like what Wayne Rooney was, or do we develop a superstar, or is that superstar going to get bought by a European club before we even get a chance to really make a run at things?
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so many factors going
It is, I know.
That, so
yeah.
I would hope in 5 years, but
well, I think they need to sign Tom Brady. And that may not be a popular opinion, but I think they need to sign Brady. Apparently, he still got it.
He didn't have it in Washington this weekend.
I heard that, but hey, I'm still sorry. I'm a Chiefs fan. We could have gone back to back if Tom Brady decided to, not ever age.
What's his name? Didn't line up off sides. What was his name?
Gosh.
Oh my God, his name escapes me right now, but Yeah, if he didn't line up off sides, we would have won. But
There we go. Yeah. I don't know. I'm out of the prediction game and the guessing game. I can tell you what wins them though. There's two teams. There's one team that has a match winner, a difference maker, and gets hot the last 2 months of the season. If anyone who watched MLS last year, that was Columbus Crew, and specifically a player, Lucas Celarayán, who is an Argentine, actually Armenian international, which is very confusing. But he literally just put the club on his back and said, "Come follow me. I'll win the cup for you guys." And he did that. And then there's another brand that's more of a Seattle or a Toronto when they were in their prime, where it's just a good team. And it doesn't have to be the most expensive team, just 18 players to choose from, best 11, put 3 or 5 subs on that are still difference makers that would be a starter in any other team. Just a well-structured team that's able to stay healthy. Because winning in regular season, winning a trophy in regular season, having the best regular season record, it's a lot different. It's a lot different than winning in the playoffs. If you tie in the playoffs and you lose in shootouts, then you're out. You could have been the best team by, 5 extra wins throughout the regular season. But if one night some team wants to bunker and they get a tie, then they can knock you out in the shootout. So it's an interesting format because there's not a lot of room for error in MLS playoffs, right? Because there's not the best of 7, not the best of 5. It's literally one game.
Yeah, because they changed it from, it used to be 2 legs to now it's just single elimination.
Single elimination, highest seed hosts, which, typically favors the home team, statistically speaking. But if you have an off night, I mean, there's just no room for error. And so you need a team with experience and that is hot, and depth works as well. So if DC United can figure out if they get a match winner, keeping them healthy throughout the course of the year, specifically the last 2 months going into playoffs, having a little depth and being able to still have some options off the bench that can unsettle teams. If they can do it in the next 5 years, I think you need a good goalie too, and DC United's got that. So if they can keep that,
we got Bill Hamid.
I know, man.
Bill Hamid. I mean, he's a legend.
He is a legend, man. I played with him, dude. Like he was.
Yeah, I was about to say he's been. I mean, he left for a couple years, but then obviously he came back. But I mean, that guy's solid.
He is solid, man.
Is solid.
He's a difference maker when he's on his game. I still think he's the best goalie in MLS. It's just he deals with injuries, and so we don't see him for 34 games throughout the year. But if we did, I think he'd win MLS best goalkeeper. So yeah, man. Hopefully sooner than later. I never won an MLS Cup.
You won the Supporters Shield twice.
I won the 2 Supporters Shield, and then I won a U.S. Open Cup, which is this knockout style tournament with literally.
It's our version of the FA Cup, essentially.
Yeah. It's a cool tournament, and so we were able to win that, and so I've not been able to lift a MLS Cup trophy, but I hope someone in a DC United uniform does that soon.
That one trophy you just named, the
Supporters Shield, or the
US
other
Open
one, Cup? The Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup.
Yeah, I mean, I researched that. I was like, Lamar Hunt, the Chiefs, and you won it.
Oh yeah,
fan. I mean, the connection was there. I was like, wow.
Yeah. So Lamar Hunt, and I'm keeping you guys overtime. Lamar Hunt, basically,
we're in extra time. It's fine. It's perfectly
extra
fine.
time. There you go. Yeah.
Ref just put up the board.
Your guys' language. Lamar Hunt, and a guy named Anschutz, which is like huge entertainment, like AEG Entertainment. Do they own the Rams now? Or no, that's Kroenke. And then Kraft, who you may be familiar with up in New England. Those three people basically owned all 10 MLS teams at one point.
They were the OGs, basically.
They were the OGs. They were the ones who were like, hey, we're going to make this work. And they ended up doing it. And so now obviously a ton of owners in the league. But so hence Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup because of what he did for U.S. soccer.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. He has his name on a soccer trophy and the trophy for the AFC champions as well. But that was just my 2 cents on that trophy.
Yeah.
But you're a Chiefs fan, you said, Devin. So that makes it even more special, right?
I know, man. I know. I know. Full circle, watching the Chiefs growing up, being able to win that too. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what we got to wrap things up here, but we got to thank our sponsors once again, Trumbull Insurance Agency, and the rest of our sponsors on that wall right behind me. Without their support, none of this would be possible. So thank you once again. Check out anything and everything the Kirby on Sports podcast at kirbyonsports.com. Once again, Devon McTavish, NBC Sports Washington analyst for DC United, and he used to play for DC United as well. Devin, this was a ton of fun, sir. We greatly appreciate you coming on.
Josh, Carlos, thank you guys. So the exciting guest is coming on next. Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, my friends, is called bringing it full circle.
There we go.
Until the next time you see us, always remember to create greatness. So long and peace out.